we'll go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is I just want you to first tell us your name and then tell everybody what your film is, and then tell us a little bit about your film.
Okay, I'm Penaz Eisner, and I made Beth's 3 O'Clock with Dr. Harlow, which is an experimental film where I basically wanted to explore conditions of failed empathy and societal sadism. And it also picked up where I left off with my previous film, which was about masculine aggression and violence in this kind of, in a Jungian manner, not literally male, but in this centered on feminine violence. And so this was supposed to be the counterpart for that film. But within it, I referenced Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Philip K. Dick's masterwork about empathy and failed empathy and societal sadism, among other things. And it's a combination between stop motion animation and live action footage for anyone who is curious, because sometimes because of the way it's made, people have a hard time telling exactly how I did it. So nothing computer generated, in case you guys get to see it.
Good. So I have to ask this because you're the first experimental filmmaker that I have interviewed, or I'm interviewing, because we just started accepting experimental films last year.
Good for you. This is great.
I enjoy experimental films, and so I hope other people do. So I like to understand what made you go towards this genre to tell your story as opposed to anything else, because normally experimental films are ambiguous and they're left to the interpretation of the viewer a lot of the times.
Well, first of all, I hope other people enjoy experimental film as well, because that's good for me. And secondly, the reason that experimental film appeals to me is that I am really interested in the idea of film, or art generally, but film specifically, because that's what I do, existing as a means through which to reveal a greater existential truth, basically. And I think that a film that doesn't have to conform to a typical narrative arc and instead can follow a process that is organic in reference to the idea that it's trying to express, works best. And so I think that experimental film allows that kind of fluidity. It allows you to construct the film in a way that doesn't have to follow a specific pre-structured arc, basically. So that's what drew me to it. And also the amount of artistic freedom that you have, like you're not beholden to any sort of standard of, I mean, obviously it has to be well executed, but you're not beholden to any standard of particular character development or image structure or, staying within the same medium within the film. So you have total control over it. And you have total control over the way the idea is expressed, and that's just something that's really exciting to me as a filmmaker.
Okay, so one of the things I like about experimental films, that a lot of the people or films I've seen have chosen to use different types of filmmaking styles in it, and experimental films are probably the only genre I can think of where it doesn't matter what style you choose or how many styles you incorporate. They all fit within the confines of the story being told. How did you come about with the stylistic choices you made, and how well they integrate with one another?
Yeah, I think that is a really cool thing about experimental film too. And for this, I mean, generally for my films, I tend to use a combination between animation and live action. Some films lean more one direction than the other, but this one is pretty equal between the two. And I mean, for me as a filmmaker, I really try to think about, for individual scenes, what is the best medium through which to express what I'm trying to show in the particular scene. And so, often animation allows more control over what specifically happens within the shot, or gives the opportunity to easily create something uncanny seeming. And so for me, that is one of the reasons that I use animation in certain areas, but not in other areas. So for example, in this particular film, a lot of the animated sequences are supposed to recall the feeling of a dream. And so that is easily achieved through animation, whereas live action can, you know, obviously realistically capture things that are actually there. And so that generally is what leads me to make the decisions that I do.
That brings up a good question. Do you do all the animation yourself for your films, or do you have someone else do it for you?
I do it all myself. I started out as a filmmaker doing animation, and so I kind of also think in that mindset. Like when I do live action shots, I really meticulously pre-plan exactly how I'm going to film them and how I'm going to frame them and that kind of thing before I show up. So I'm doing, you know, 3 takes tops just to make sure a fly didn't fly into my frame, and then I'm out because I know exactly what I want it to look like. But yeah, so I do it all myself.
So that brings up a good question. How much preparation did you do for this film? Because I guess my thought processes for something like this would be that you might do a lot more improv on set as opposed to actually storyboards and everything else. But your films incorporate animation. So how much do you do in terms of pre-production, or what type of pre-production do you do for your film?
I think that a lot of people who make experimental film do quite a bit of improvisation because they collect sort of images and sounds and ideas and then place it together. That's not something, and I think the purpose of that is to create kind of a stream of consciousness feeling. And I think that that feeling is great to create, and I have that feeling. I like the flow of that, but that is not something that I do to create that feeling. I think that if I want something to feel like you're traveling through it, I have to pre-plan it in a lot of detail to intentionally construct that feeling. So, and you know, that becomes clear, obviously, like you said, through the fact that I use animation, I kind of have to. But so for this film, I storyboarded out all the shots in detail. I, you know, made a shot list, figuring out how I was going to technically do everything. I figured out my sound and my music, and I really ironed that out really well before I started filming anything. And that tends to be the process that I do follow generally. I'm pretty meticulous about pre-production, but I don't want it to feel like it was neurotically pre-planned. I want it to feel like you're, you know, taking a joyride, so to speak, because the concept is horrifying, but through the film.
How long, I know for a lot of filmmakers, they spend a little time on pre-production, spend a lot of time on post-production. How much, or what's the ratio between how much you spent on production for your film, or pre-production for that matter, in regards to the editing aspects of your film?
Right. So for this particular film, this was the first time that I really delved into, I've done this since now, but it was the first time I really delved into trying to truly edit out my backgrounds and create shots where there were images that were like floating in space and there was significant black space around those images. And that was something that I thought could be easily accomplished with basically gamma settings, and I was wrong. So I realized that, you know, to some degree in my pre-planning, that I needed to light things a certain way, and I consulted a colleague about this and got some assistance. But when I actually filmed my shots, I realized that the process of editing out the backgrounds was going to be much more complex than I thought. So the post-production was a lot of me photoshopping / using DaVinci to do complex editing on the backgrounds. And so that made the post-production for this film, because I was trying to really truly figure out how to do that, take longer than I think it normally would, because I've done it since and it's not taken as long. But I would say that I don't know if I can give an exact percentage, but I can say safely that the pre-production probably took an equal amount of time to the post-production, whereas like my editing usually takes less time because I usually just know what I want. So it's just cutting off the ends of clips and then color grading. And because I know what I want the color grade to look like and I know how to do it, I just do it, you know.
Okay. So that, you know, how many hats did you fill in this film? Writing, directing, producing, editing, all the
Okay, yeah, I did literally everything excepting the voice of the doctor and the back of the woman's body. I was literally one of the hands that was animated. That was me. I mean, I did almost everything.
Oh, wow.
But I did not write the credits. I got my grandmother to do it because she has really beautiful cursive and my writing is chicken scratch.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that being said, how long did it take you, or roughly how long did it take you from the start to the end to make this movie?
It took me about 8 months, working mostly on weekends and school breaks because I'm still in school.
Oh, okay. That wasn't that long. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Oh well. What school do you go to then?
I'm still in high school, but I'm a rising senior, so I'm almost out of there.
Congrats! I wouldn't have been able to tell that from your film. So no. From watching your film, I wouldn't have known.
It's good. It's the plan.
Well, we rarely get we rarely get any filmmakers from high schoolers. So it's good to hear that high schoolers are delving into these type of films even at that age. So I
think my parents sufficiently artistically conditioned me by taking me to the museum all the time from a really young age.
All right, so you now told me you're in high school. What are your aspirations? Are you trying to be a filmmaker, or is this just like a hobby?
Oh, this is my thing. I'm definitely going to be applying to film schools, and as time has passed, my specific aspirations have evolved from wanting to be sort of a gallery artist filmmaker to realizing that that's really not what appeals to me specifically, and that I would like to work more in independent films and hopefully ultimately become either basically like a total filmmaker or a creative producer of some kind. So yeah.
Well, who are some of the filmmakers that have inspired your work?
I've been inspired by a lot of people, but people like Maya Deren and Luis Buñuel come to mind for the kinds of work that I currently like to make. But people like David Lynch and Werner Herzog, who make odd stuff that people actually want to watch and that makes money, that kind of really does interest me.
Herzog is like a non-stop filmmaker, cranking films every year. The guy is a god in indie film to me. I mean,
he's incredible. He's really incredible. I wish he would watch this so I could meet him. We could be friends, please.
He does films in every genre known to mankind, and they're all different from one another.
They're all good. Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, he makes a lot of films, and there's, of course, a range, but none of them are bad. They're all, like, way better than average. It's incredible. I mean, I wish I could be that prolific. I mean, unfortunately, I have to sleep, more than 3 hours a night, so...
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think he's cranking. Sometimes it feels like he's cranking out 3 or 4 movies a freaking year. I'm like, dude, I do one every 10 years. Come on.
I make short films, and I don't even make that many a year. I make, I think I made 3 maybe once, but 2 tops. I mean, usually there's one that I am mostly dedicated to.
So you spend a lot of time just kind of picking out the ideals and. Do you have a traditional script when you're coming up with this, or is it an outline, or?
I mean, obviously I know how to structure a script, but I don't tend to need to use a script specifically because a lot of my films have very little speaking in them. And so, who am I going to give the script to? So it's usually a storyboard and then just a shot list which is basically just everything on the storyboard written down and combined with all of the details, like which camera am I going to use? Which lights am I going to use? What materials do I need for this? So I have it organized in a way where I can access it when I'm setting my shot up. So I'm not taking my entire closet of film equipment with me, on a hike for 4 miles, schlepping it,
No, I understand. My first couple films were kind of like that. And then now I've been doing a film festival, so I haven't had time to do my own work. That will change because COVID allowed me time to sit down and write some stuff. The one good thing that came out of this.
Exactly. COVID has not been good for, having other people be in your film or something, because you kind of can't stand 6 feet away from your actors while they wear masks, but it's definitely good to give time to work on stuff that you either don't need other people to specifically assist with, or write or come up with ideas. And it's put enough existential stress and pressure on people that they come up with ideas.
Oh yeah. So one of the things I want to know is what are your biggest challenges with making a film like this?
Well, as I previously mentioned, for this particular film, the biggest challenge was trying to figure out the thing with the black, and it was ultimately very satisfying because now I've been able to easily edit scenes like that for other films because, you know, it's good to get over hurdles like that because then you know how to do it in the future. So that's great. I mean, on a deeper level, the biggest challenge is managing everything and doing it all yourself, but it's ultimately satisfying because at least it all comes out how you want it to come out. And it's not a challenge in the sense that it needs to be resolved, but more so that it's just, you have to do it. It's a lot of work.
Okay. So
it's like you're working overtime, but nobody's paying you extra. You're just doing it because you want to.
Yeah, and for a film like this, where you're wearing so many hats, I'm sure it's a lot more satisfying knowing that you put a lot of your own blood, sweat, and tears in this, and it's going to come out the way you envisioned it. So it's more of an auteur film.
Right.
So, I mean, I applaud that. I wish I had done some experimental films when I was younger. I never had it.
There's always time. You can do it. Especially, we're quarantined. Just, you know, be animating at 3 a.m. in your house. No.
Well, one of the amazing things is we are actually screening a feature film, which is very rare. That's very much in the experimental vein, which is Under the Jazz. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to speak with that filmmaker. I forget where she's. I think it's a she. Located at, I think it's Spain or something like that.
Cool.
But the ideal that, like you were saying with Werner Herzog and David Lynch, that there is a market out there for experimental filmmakers to do longer projects. I so rarely see them in the indie market. I wish I see more. I hope I see more since I just started adding that category. But this is the only feature I've seen that isn't David Lynch, who's very marketable. Damn him, so he could crank out a 3.5-hour experimental film and make money off of it. I don't know.
It's bizarre. I'm really impressed by it. He just somehow finagled his way in there, and now people look at his work and they're like, yeah, you know, I would like to sit in a movie theater and watch bizarre montage sequences of people killing each other and having weird teeth for 3 hours. That sounds great. But when I do it, it's, quote, weird. No, just kidding.
Well, trust me, if you hopefully you have a chance to see some of the other experimental films that we picked for this year.
I did. I watched the program this morning.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
I loved it. It was great.
Well, hopefully you can utilize some of the ideas from those filmmakers to, you know, for your future films. You're young. You hopefully when you go to college, they'll be still teaching and fostering that whole thing about doing experimental films. Because I do have a fear that when you go to film school, they teach you how to be or confine your ideals to what's marketable. Unfortunately, when I went to film school, that's very much what we did, because I went for analysis and theory and analysis is what I got my degree in. So we were breaking down films and confining them to a pre-described ideal of what a good film is. Experimental films, you can't bottle it up like that. You can't label it something and then that be the end of it. Experimental films are by nature experimental.
I feel like for film to, experimental or otherwise, to be just stuck in a blender and made into marketable characteristics with no otherwise value is just kind of an insult to film. You know, even films that are narrative can be different in many ways from each other. And I think that my main interest in film school is for learning to do things that I don't know how to do and having opportunities to collaborate with people who are also, you know, talented and, you know, have something to offer, and to be exposed to different ways of thinking about film, you know, and people who are really accomplished and know more than I do and can teach me stuff. But I'm not going to stop making weird stuff just because some one person tells me to.
Good. That's what I like to hear. So when you go to college, have you have an idea of where you want to focus your talents? Writing, directing, producing, or are you going to be like a David Lynch, who does everything with his films.
Everyone, when they go into film school, all of the people who I know who are younger, everyone says they want to go into directing. So I don't want to say I want to go into directing because that sounds like everybody else. No, but I want to go into basically, like you said, being an auteur filmmaker, being a total filmmaker, doing all of it. And I guess if I had to choose a field, I would choose directing. If I had to choose a specific section, just given that it would give you, the connections and opportunities you needed to be in the position to have more control. But I really want to do more than just direct people. I want to have creative control over all of the other stuff. So yeah, that's my area of interest, just everything except, acting, not because I'm not good at acting. I have done acting, but I don't know. I don't want to be like Clint Eastwood. He's cool, but I don't really want to be in all of my own films. That's a little much. People probably get sick of me.
I understand. My original idea was to be like everyone says, a director, and then realized after directing several films, I realized my talents lies with writing and producing. So I focus more on that, and when I have the chance to direct something, which isn't very often, I'll take it. But my goal is to help other filmmakers get their films made. That's where my talents lie. Hence why I do a film festival. So I'm all good with that.
Which is great because those things are super important. Like all of the different parts of a film set, all of the things that help the machine run are super important.
So, you being in California, are there any particular things that you can? Well, actually, no. I have a question that makes much sense, but this will make better. Are there any things that inspire you as a filmmaker? Not people, but yeah, you have any films that you absolutely pull from, or styles that you pull from?
I really am interested in films that follow sort of dream logic, and also films that integrate animation and live action well. I mean, who's surprised, because this is what I do. But somebody who I didn't mention earlier, even though I love his films and he's my favorite filmmaker literally ever, is Jan Schwankmeyer. And I think about his film Bit, which means the flat in Czech, a lot. And the reason that particular film really appeals to me, I wouldn't say I pull directly from it or from any other film, but some of the manners of structure, I guess, and imagery do inspire me. And anyway, that particular film really interests me because he has it's basically about this guy. It's a short experimental film. It's about this guy who moves into this flat, and it's sort of a statement about Eastern Bloc communism and how it basically doesn't work, but basically everything in his flat starts falling apart on him. And a lot of that is animated. And I just think that the way that it's cut together with the live action footage of the man walking around and exploring in his flat with the stuff that's falling apart and which is animated, or not functioning properly, which is animated, is just really seamless. And you don't think about it because there's no sort of like abrupt change in the speed of the movement or any sort of feeling of frame rate shift or anything like that. And that is that's a really good guide for how I want my films to feel, because I like the idea of having the different mediums, but not having people consciously think, oh, she switched from animation to live action. How interesting. Because I don't want people to think about it in the middle of the film. And that is really one of the, obviously there are multiple films that do this, but this is really one of the only films that endeavors to actually do that and actually does it successfully. Because often a lot of films that have animation and live action like just blatantly shift from one to the other. And it's okay in the context of those films. But it's difficult to sort of try not to do that and then also succeed at it.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. I as soon as you said something like that, I was thinking of the movie John Dies at the End, that has the one animated sequence just so they didn't have to do a bloody sequence in the whole movie. It's like the only animated sequence in the entire movie. Don't get me wrong, the movie's good, but it throws you off a little bit when you're watching the movie, and all of a sudden there's just an animated sequence, and then it goes back to live action once that sequence is all over. It really doesn't fit, other than the fact that you're saying, oh, that draws attention to itself. It's animated sequence. Okay.
it kind of feels like a jump in certain contexts. Another film that I feel like has that a little bit is the film Natural Born Killers, because there's all these stylistic shifts within it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the intention was to create a sense of sort of dissonance, but it's not creating a sense of like internal dissonance within the film. It's just distracting because you go from one place to the next and you think to yourself, oh, okay, it's animated now. Oh, okay, there's different color now.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. I mean, there's a reason why that's not one of my favorites of Oliver Stone's movies. It's a good movie, but
everybody knows that Platoon is the best Oliver Stone movie and that the rest of them go downhill significantly from there.
I will not disagree with you. All right. So I've already asked you, what actually, I was about to say, what joy do you find out of making these type of films? Because I've already asked you what the worst thing about making this film was. So tell me a story about one of the best things about making this film was.
Okay, something that was really, really, really prescient, I guess. Is that the right word? You know what? I don't know. Oh yeah, the thing that was really great about this film was when no, I have a better thing to say than that. So the thing that was really great about this film was when I was I had this idea of the spider as a theme in this film because of the part in Android's Dream of Electric Sheep where the replicant pulls its legs off, and also because of the evil spider god of Bergman's, and Through Glass Darkly. And so I wanted that to be in the film. The scene where the spider is in the glass, I animated that scene before I actually started making this film, when I was just thinking about it, because the spider literally fell into my glass while I was drinking. And I thought, oh my God, this is perfect for my film idea. I'm going to go upstairs and photograph it moving around in there before I let it outside, because I hate crushing bugs because it makes me unhappy. And so I photographed it, and then I had that, and I already had the idea of the scene of the taxidermy dried up spider with its legs removed. I had that idea already in my mind. So that was so great. That was just such a great thing to have happen. And it was just a great coincidence. And the other thing that was great, talking about bugs in this film, great, yeah, love to open a conversation. Yeah, talking about bugs. But anyway, the bees that I put the pins in belonged to a friend of my parents who has beehives. She raises bees, and she told us when we were at dinner that when bees reach the end of their lifespans, they basically go outside of the hive to die. And so they were basically these nearly dead bees, but when you put them in a new environment, they get kind of excited, so they move around again, but then they ultimately die. So we basically got them a few hours before they died, and I photographed them, and they were moving around, and then they just peacefully passed away. And so I was able to put the pins in them, and it was just, the timing was perfect, and I didn't know that about bees previously. I didn't know that that was how their lives ended, so I just thought that it was really great that I didn't have to somehow, I don't know, catch bees from the wild and photograph them running around and then buy bees on the internet that looked the same or something like that, you know?
Well, I was wondering how you achieved that. That's interesting. That's something I did not know about bees at all. Huh. You learned something.
I also didn't want to have to kill them, and you know, A, because that's terrible, and B, pun unintended, because I don't want to get stung by one.
Okay. So we are coming up on our time. So sorry. But what I'd like to know is, what would you want to tell the people who are watching your film about your film? I mean, tell people what you want them to get out of your film, or not.
Besides what I said, I would say something that I would say about any film, which is just watch it and enjoy it or not. Either is fine, and allow yourself to have a strong reaction to it if you do, and hopefully it will unearth something that was heretofore unknown to you, And if not, watch it again because it's not that long.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, experimental films, you know, now that I've seen enough, I've been watching it for the last 3 years. I've seen a lot of different ones, some good, some bad. If you ever were to watch some of the ones submitted to us, you'd realize that they're not all worth watching.
I do pre-screening for a film festival, so sometimes I do have that experience. Sometimes I'm like, oh, okay.
About 150. Well, this year we got about 150 submissions, and it was this is smaller than normal. I'm thinking the whole COVID thing kind of killed us.
Yeah.
A little bit. And so we whittled that down to about 60 movies. So there was another 90 movies, I guess, we did not pick. So,
dang.
Yeah, we have to. There's just too many movies out there, and we have to pick the ones that we think audiences will enjoy, or there are filmmakers who are returning to us with a new film, which we always try and screen their new film. If you send this film once and it gets in, more than likely we want to see what you come up with next, and that's the same with you and other experimental filmmakers. I hope that you'll send us more films, and we get to see more films because we like to see where you're going from here. You being a high school student, that's that's one huge thing we'd love to see. Like a couple years from now, you're in college making a 30-minute experimental film. We're gonna want to see it. Whether
hopefully it won't be 30 minutes of just grass or something. No, I'm just kidding. That's too film conservative for me. There has to be something at least minorly offensive or disgusting, or at least interesting, within the film for it to work.
Well, with that being said, I'm glad you were able to do the film interview, and I'm hoping that everyone who watches this later will get an idea of who you are as a filmmaker and where you're going to go from here. And if you really want to watch an experimental film that's a little crazy and you haven't watched it yet, it's The Legend of the Chicken Fish, which I think is in the animation section.
Ooh, okay, awesome.
An experimental film that feels like they were borrowing from Monty Python. It is out there.
Oh wait, The Legend of the Chicken. That was in a film festival with me before. I've seen that. That's really good. The second you said Monty Python, I realized what you were talking about. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, it is really good.
So yeah, I mean, I'm always impressed with the ideals that some filmmakers come out, and I'm willing to take that leap to say, hey, tell me a story. Tell me a different story. Experimental films are something that someone else has not told me before, so I'm definitely going to be interested. So, but that being said, I hope there's nothing but the best for you. So you're just going. You're young. You're getting in there. You're going to be in college. You're going to be doing films and stuff like that. I wish you nothing but the best with that, and I hope to see the next project that you have. And whatever films that you didn't get to see already, you have plenty to see over the weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And again, thanks for having my film in the festival. I'm really excited with what I've seen so far. I'm definitely going to be watching more stuff. I'm in my house. Might as well. But also, it's good. So thank you so much.